Welcome to the Food Bank Show with me, Steve Bennett. I'm going to be your host for this series. Now, today in our first episode, we're going to have some great guests for you. First, we're going to be speaking to Tom Watson. Now, remember Tom? He was the deputy leader of the Labour Party. He's also got a great health story to tell. He calls it his downsizing story. He was once very obese. He was diabetic type 2. And then he decided to change the way he approached his food and his exercise. He lost loads and loads of weight and has reversed his type 2 diabetes. Tom, though, wants to talk today about what life might be like after this virus hopefully has gone. He's got a really interesting opinion about this. Then we're going to go and see Dr. Aseem Malhotra. He's recently been on the BBC. He was on Sky a couple of days ago. And Dr. Aseem is going to talk to us about the steps you and I can take to, if we do get this virus, of course we've got to try not to get it, we've got to socially distance, we've got to wash our hands, do all those things, stay in more, no socialising. But if we were to get it, it's going to give us some advice about how we minimise its effects. And I'll give you a little clue right now. It's going to be around eating whole foods and trying to avoid the ultra-processed foods. And he'll explain why in great detail. He's got statistics about what happened in Italy and China, and it's really a compelling story that he's got about how we minimise the effect of the virus. Then we're going to go and speak to one of the directors of the Trussell Trust, because remember what we're trying to do here is raise money for the food banks across the UK. You're going to be able to donate via text or on our Just Giving page, and we're going to really try and help out the food banks because there's a real problem right now. They've been doing a brilliant job for many years. Great volunteers, great organisation, the Trussell Trust. But just imagine, you know what it's like at the moment. You race around the supermarket, you're trying to get stuff from your parents, you're filling your shopping basket, you're trying to get in, quite rightly, as quick as you can. Just means at the moment they're getting less donations into the food bank boxes. And of course, those volunteers in the centres, well, a lot of them are quite older people. And what's happening there is less of them, because of social distancing, are able to go in. So there's a real crisis at the moment. But the Trussell Trust are amazing. And together, you and I, what we're going to do, we're going to try and eat more healthily ourselves. And what we save by not eating all the snacks and the junk food, we're all hopefully going to donate to the Trussell Trust. And here's the big thing. One of the reasons that we wanted to do this show, we think there's an opportunity right now, because with those fast food chains shut, that means we've got to change our eating habits anyway, haven't we? No more McDonald's at the moment, means we need to change. Restaurants are shut, bars are shut, means we've got to eat more at home, we've got to cook more at home. So with the doctors, the nutritionists and these amazing chefs, and by the way, the best-selling book in the UK is by the Cardiologist, it's a great cookbook. They're coming on the show later in the week. Together, we're going to cook better. We're going to live more healthily. We're going to get through this together. And out the other side, maybe life will be a little bit better. But let's start by going and talking to Patrick Holden. Now, Patrick was the chairman of the Soil Association for 20 years. And he knows more about the state of our farming in the UK than anybody. And I thought this would be a great message to start with.
I think very few people realise that if you go to a supermarket and buy standard, normal salad vegetables, and I'm talking here about lettuces, tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, all the salad crops, none of them are grown in soil anymore. They're all grown in this rock wool or equivalent. It's like a sort of nutrient-holding medium, and they're nourished with fertilisers in solution. And this has replaced soil-grown vegetables, soil-grown salads. And you can't buy them anymore. You can if you buy organic. In this country, in America, the conventional growing lobby has just changed the standards and made it possible to grow even organic vegetables hydroponically. Now, that's the equivalent...
Sorry. So, whoa, stop there a second. You're saying in America, saying the word organic doesn't even mean it grew in soil. The purpose of this event every single day, kicking off at 10 o'clock. And by the way, thank you to everybody that's joined us so early on. We're at about 55 viewers at the moment. Hopefully that will build. The purpose of this is kind of threefold. Firstly, we want to help educate everybody. I want to get the doctors together, the nutritionists together, and really explain what good food looks like. Now, this is more important now than ever before, because what we're being told by the doctors is the following, and that is, after keeping our social distancing, after washing our hands, the next best thing we can do is to boost our immune system, our defense system, by eating real food. So the first purpose of this show every day is to really give you some insights into food and really help you learn more about food. And you probably think you know lots already. So did I when I was obese. The problem is what we've been taught in the past simply is wrong. We're going to tell you the facts with our doctors and our nutritionists. Secondly, we're going to raise awareness for the food banks of the UK. We're going to make donations, hopefully, awareness. We're going to raise money for them, get support. And we're going to go and visit those food banks with live links every day to learn more about what we can do to help those that are most in need at this time. And then the third purpose of this show, and this is really, really important because these are tough times. But when we climb out the other side, when this thing hopefully goes away, when we're rebuilding society, I actually think there's a bit of a silver lining. We'll have reshaped our eating habits. We'll have to reshape them, won't we? Because the supermarkets, well, not so much the supermarkets, but the fast food chains, the McDonald's aren't there at the moment. Our favorite restaurants aren't there at the moment. So we're having to reshape our eating habits together. So 3 things. We want to really help educate everybody about what good food looks like to boost your immune system. We can have lots of dialings from doctors and so on and so forth. Secondly, we want to raise money and awareness for the great food banks around our country that are needing our help more than ever at the moment because less donations are coming in. Kind of understand that with people rushing in and out of supermarkets. And of course, a lot of their volunteers are older and therefore they're social distancing too. So the food banks, when they need it the most, need our help more than ever. And then a lot of the shows can be talking about the upside. When we get out of this, when we rebuild society, what's the shape of it? Maybe we'll have helped sort of slow down global warming. Now, let's talk about, I just had a little comment in there, thank you very, very, very much indeed, about what was my story. So I was approaching my 50th birthday 5 years ago, and my wife said she was pregnant again. I was obese. I was very, very overweight. I was obese and I had all the problems that went along with that. And I was kind of confused because I'd always tried to stay fit. I'd always calorie counted. But for 25 years, I'd lost that battle with my bulge. I mean, it just kept winning. I just couldn't shift that weight. And the year before we had little Louis, I should have been really fit. I walked to the North Pole with my son-in-law, and although the newspaper headlines got it all wrong, they said that because he was just about to marry my daughter, the newspapers spun it the other way and they said, nasty father-in-law to be, makes son-in-law walk to the North Pole to make sure he's good enough for his daughter. It wasn't that at all. We were there to raise money for a charity. But the point is, I was at the North Pole. I trained for a year before, pulling tractor tyres around my garden and around the local village where everybody thought I was a nutcase, and yet I was still obese. Later that year, I was working with the Maasai tribes in Kenya. And I'd get up in the morning, I'd go jogging every morning, so I was getting ready for a marathon, but I was still obese. And then that afternoon, 2 of the Maasais were cooking this goat for me, and they saw me taking off the fat. And they looked at me and they went, Steve. I said, what? They said, you go running in the morning and you take off the fat so you look big, fat, westernized? And I went, no, completely opposite. The opposite. I'm doing all those things to try and lose this stomach. I want to look like you, nice and lean, strong like the Maasai. They went, well, Mr. Bennett, it's not working. So basically, all these things came together. I should have been fit. I was training like crazy. I was calorie counting, but I was just eating all the wrong food. And then when Sarah said she was pregnant again, I thought, well, I'm not going to be around to see my kids grow up. And I was really, really, really frightened. So I took myself away, locked myself away from my business for a couple of years, surrounding myself with doctors and nutritionists, and the fat just disappeared quite easily. In fact, I stopped training as much as I was. I stopped the cycling, I stopped the jogging, I started to walk more, but I just learned about real food. And I became furious that actually I'd been fed a pack of lies about what it is that makes us healthy. Hence the book is called Fat and Furious. I was fat the vast majority of my adult life, and I'm furious actually that it is so simple. Now, we're going to go and listen and get an interview with Tom Watson. And by the way, throughout today's show, I've got my children producing the show because we're on lockdown, and we're going to get some more cameras in here tomorrow. So you can see I've got my son, Jack, 18, in the background. We'll have some cameras on him tomorrow, my daughter, Jessie, and they're going to be updating me with what's going on throughout the show. But we're going to go and meet a Mr. Tom Watson with a live video link. It'll be the first live video link we have done. But let me tell you a little bit about Tom's story. Tom, many of you will know, was the deputy leader of the Labour Party. But while he was working at the Labour Party, he became bigger and bigger and bigger, and he was massively overweight. His book tells the story, and by the way, it's a beautiful book. It's not a heavy medical read or anything like that. This is a book that tells a real, true story. And Tom tells a story about how he lost 8 stone in weight by not following conventional wisdom, by not following the Eat Well guidelines. Tom did something different. He took his own weight under control, changed his diet, changed his exercising, and lost the weight. Most importantly, he reversed his type 2 diabetes. Now, if you have type 2 diabetes or you're pre-diabetic, what were you taught in the past? Well, you were taught that it was a chronic disease, that it was irreversible, that it was a progressive disease. In other words, it's just going to get worse and worse. And my dad, his type 2 diabetic, has to inject himself every day, sadly. But no longer is that the case, that it's irreversible. In fact, over the last few years, 70,000 people in the UK have reversed their type 2 diabetes, put it in remission, including Tom Watson. Now, why is this really, really, really important? It's really important because anything you can do to sort out your metabolism will help you really build your immune system and make sure you're in a better place to fight this virus. Do we have Tom on the line, Jack?
Tom is having some technical difficulties.
Tom's having some technical difficulties. First day on the show, that's the kind of thing we would expect to happen on the first day. So we will get Tom online in just a second. He's going to be dialing in. So later on in the show, we're going to go and hear from Aseem Malhotra. Now, Aseem is a cardiologist, and he said this to me yesterday, and you'll hear from him later live. He said this: 3 things to prevent or ward off or minimize the damage of this virus. First one, social distancing. Stay that 2 meters apart. Very, very important that we all adhere to that. Secondly, wash your hands after you touch anything. Wash. What do they say? Wash your hands, sing happy birthday at least twice. That's the sort of extreme measures we need to go to on our hands. But then the third most important thing that nobody is yet talking about is that we need to eat real food. And the reason for that is we have an immune system. And it is those with a weaker immune system that the problem of the virus seems to be affecting more and more. In other words, the outcomes are more serious outcomes. In fact, if you look to Italy, where the average death was 81 years, those that either sadly died or had serious complications had 2.7, so nearly 3 underlying health problems: diabetes, high blood pressure, and so on. Now, that could be kind of frightening, but here's the good thing. We think, and with all the doctors that helped me write my book, and I work with 23 doctors on the book, we think you can reverse your ill health, whether that be diabetes, whether it be high blood pressure. We think you can put that into remission or start making or seeing the benefits really, really quickly. In fact, Aseem Malhotra, on a recent podcast I did with him, said within 21 days of significantly changing your diet and just get out and walking, medically they can see huge swings in how our body is functioning. And here is the crazy thing. Ever since the Second World War, ever since we've had fertilizers, ever since the fast food chains have appeared, we've developed something called the metabolic syndrome. Now, metabolic syndrome basically means, I don't want to get too technical yet, but we'll just kind of fill in till we get Tom in. The metabolic syndrome is all these different things coming together. The food we eat has a part to play in diabetes, in Alzheimer's, in cancer, in heart disease, in fatty liver disease, and of course obesity itself. And if we can get our food choices right, and that is all about understanding food, and we're going to do that every day. By the way, we're going to ask you a question. We're going to ask you a question, and this is what it is, and we'll show you later in the show. What is, in fact, we'll start the question now, and we'll reveal later. Well, today we'll go after Subway. So when you eat a 12-inch Subway, just the bread, not the filling, just the bread alone, how many lumps of sugar does that turn into inside the body? Now you might be, if you're new to all this, go, well, of course it doesn't, it's bread. Well, actually all bread, once we consume it, turns into sugar. And what we want to know, in fact, Jack's gone and told you the answer straight away. 15 cubes of sugar, just the bread when you eat a Subway. 15 cubes, what does that mean? The effect of eating that Subway, the effect it has on your blood sugar levels, and it's your blood sugar levels, your glucose levels, that are the things that are driving diabetes and driving obesity. The effect of just eating a bread, not the filler, is the same as eating 15 cubes of sugar. So when we're trying to build up our immune system at the moment, we don't want to be eating lots and lots of bread. What we're going to be doing with the nutritionist, though, is working throughout these shows and explaining the sort of things that we could be eating. Jack, if we haven't yet got Tom,
Do you want to call him?
if we haven't got Tom yet, I'll tell you what we'll do, Jack. Let's go and show the Robert Lustig clip, because I've just talked a little bit about metabolic syndrome. Now, there's a great doctor in America. His name is Robert Lustig. I'm just seeing if I've got one of his books with me. Yes, I have. He's the author of a book called The Hacking of the American Mind. His clip on YouTube has been visited 9 million times, and he's going to explain to us, give me the hands up when you're ready, Jack, he's going to explain to us a little bit about metabolic syndrome.
Are the constellation of diseases that travel with obesity. So type 2 diabetes, hypertension, lipid problems, cardiovascular disease, cancer, dementia, fatty liver disease, polycystic ovarian disease. Turns out this is now 75% of all healthcare costs in both the US and in the UK.
Well,
now,
you put a large percentage of that down to what we're eating, consuming?
So people thought this was about obesity. Turns out it's not about obesity. It is true that obesity travels with these diseases. I don't argue that. It is true that obesity is a risk factor for these diseases. I don't argue that too. But normal weight people get all of those diseases as well. In fact, clinical depression causes weight loss, but causes these diseases through the same mechanism, just not through subcutaneous, the fat you can see. Turns out this is the fat you can't see. It's the fat in your organs, it's the fat in your liver. And there are ways you get it. And it turns out sugar is the most potent way of driving fat in your liver, which drives all of these diseases. And now we've demonstrated the mechanism. We even have the molecule, we even have the intermediate by which sugar is metabolized that causes all of these diseases. It's called methylglyoxal. It is an intermediary metabolite of the sugar fructose, and it poisons the liver cell, and in the process drives all of these chronic metabolic diseases. So we now have molecule to disease, disease to medical calamity to agricultural disaster to planetary immolation.
Okay, so that was Robert Lustig explaining a little bit about metabolic syndrome and how it's all linked together. Now, I've had a question come through. I've had loads of questions coming through. We're just working out some technology here. Always going to be like this first day. Computers have jitters. We're dead nervous as well, I'll be absolutely honest. But one of the questions we've had coming through is, what's your stance on vegetarianism? Let me tell you what it's about. I think, and I wrote in the book, that when it comes to eating food, it should not be a war about vegetarians against meat eaters. That's not really the battle, right? Some vegetarians can live really, really healthy. Some meat eaters can be healthy, and you can have unhealthy, both ends of the scale. The real battle, though, and the real question is not vegan against meat eaters. It's about real food against fake food. You see, when we eat vegetables, if they're not grown organically, when the fertilizer runs off the field, it turns into nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide stays in the atmosphere for 100 years and is 200 times more damaging per molecule than even carbon dioxide. So, vegetables not grown properly, big problem for our health, big problem for the planet. Let's talk about the cow. Now, the cow's had a bit of a bad rap lately in the sense that they're saying it's the cow's fault for global warming. That's complete rubbish. The belching of a cow doesn't cause global warming. Well, it does to a very tiny sense. But if those cows are outside grazing on grass, then they're eating grass. And by eating grass, that means more grass grows. And when more grass grows, the great news here is this. It sequesters carbon dioxide. In fact, grass sequesters more carbon dioxide than even trees. Isn't that amazing? So after our oceans, we need the grass. But of course, farmers aren't going to keep their fields having grass with cows on it. They're going to put crops instead, and probably with fertilizers, if people don't eat the meat. So the real question is this. Oh, don't get me wrong. A cow in a shed, especially in America, being fed the wrong food, being fed corn that was grown genetically, with chemicals, is part of the problem. That is part of the problem. But part of the solution is real meat, real food. We've got to get this understanding across. It's not vegetarians against meat eaters. It is, though, real food against fake food.
Got Aseem on the line.
We've got Aseem on the line, have we? Okay, so we're going to rejuggle the show around a little bit. And a good friend of mine, Dr. Aseem Malhotra, cardiologist, has been on the BBC lots this week and Sky News. Here is Aseem Malhotra joining us. Aseem, how are you doing?
Hi, Steve. I'm good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, great to have you along today, mate. First day nerves, mate. I'm so nervous. Anyway, how are you? What's happening? I mean, you must be super busy at the moment.
Yeah, well, just like everybody else, Steve, to be honest, just trying to do what I can during the lockdown, isn't it? To try and keep sort of mentally healthy, physically healthy, keep yourself stimulated in terms of your mind and your body. I mean, it's a really difficult time for everybody. So we have to just make the most of it, really, to be honest.
Now, your first book, The Piopi Diet, was very much looking at a specific diet, the Mediterranean diet, and so on. Can you give the listeners and the viewers your opinion on eating real food and how that may put us in good stead to
Steve, it's a really good point. I mean, you said it. You said it earlier. The most important thing we can do, one of the most important things we can do for our health, is to eat real food. And what does that mean? Well, let's just put it in context. Unfortunately, half of the British diet now, and this is similar in many Western countries, is ultra processed food. What is ultra processed food? It's junk food, really, but it's basically anything that is mass produced that, comes out of a packet that has, what I tell my patients, if it's got 5 or more ingredients, then it's most likely ultra processed and you should avoid it. And it's very strongly linked now to excess weight, metabolic disease. Metabolic disease is just another term for excess body fat that results in certain conditions that are associated with poor health outcomes, which include type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, a damaging cholesterol profile, which all links to heart disease. And obviously, I'm first and foremost, I'm a cardiologist. So for me, it's a particular area of interest. I think what's another interesting piece of information for people, which is something I've been looking at over the last few weeks, of course, is so much anxiety around COVID-19, around the coronavirus,
Sure.
is that the people that tend to suffer the worst outcomes, as in the people that, go between having a mild illness that they can manage at home to being hospitalized and sadly even going on ventilators and dying, most of those people that suffer the worst outcomes tend to have some form of chronic disease related to lifestyle. And, in that hierarchy, it is poor diet, number one, which is now responsible for more disease and death than physical inactivity, smoking and alcohol combined. So,
wow.
I think one of the things I would say is the best way to protect yourself from COVID-19 is to eat real food, which is what we're advocating for. Now, it's very difficult for a lot of people. They think it's very difficult to get nutritious food because a lot of the food that's cheap and heavily marketed is ultra processed, very high in refined carbohydrates, unhealthy fats, these seed oils we talk about, vegetable oils, for example. What I would suggest people do if they can is try and minimize that as much as possible. It is unavoidable, unfortunately. If you can get it down to zero, great. But even if you can get it down to less than, 20% or 10% of what you're eating, you're going to be in a much healthier physical state that if and when you contract the virus, and the likelihood is there is a strong chance that most of us at some point will get it, our bodies will be able to deal with it better.
Okay. And what sort of foods are we trying to avoid in this time? I keep saying, maybe the silver lining is with, the McDonald's closed down and the Subway's closed down. Maybe the silver lining is we've got to change our eating habits anyway, and the restaurants are closed. So if you were saying to some of your patients, some of your close friends, you've got to cook at home tonight anyway, give us 5 things to probably cut down on, avoid, 5 things that, would maybe bolster our immune system.
I think one of the things I would say is sugar, cut down on all sugar, which means foods that have added sugar, okay, as well as fruit juice, smoothies, syrups, these sort of sweets, that kind of stuff. We tend to eat those foods as snacks. So linked to that, Steve, I'd say is if you're eating nutritious food that's satiating, it's going to keep you full, you don't really need to snack and you won't feel you need to snack. I think a friend and colleague of mine, Jason Funk, says you can tell people to stop, to eat less, but you can't tell them to stop feeling hungry.
Sure.
So the question is, what is making us consume more food and is going to interfere with our appetite? And it's all these junk foods. Once you cut them out, it's much easier to actually eat more healthily and not overconsume on these foods. So I think that's a really important message. And listen, I was coming from a background of someone that, used to eat lots of sugar. I would say I was addicted to sugar, probably got through, 30 to 40 teaspoons of sugar a day at one stage. Obviously, when I looked at the science and read the research, I realized that it was damaging for me, in the medium to long term. So I cut it out. And actually, once you cut it out, within 2 to 3 weeks for most people, actually what you find, Steve, and what I see with my patients is that addiction, that craving disappears. Taste buds change.
Yeah.
People think, buddy, how can I live without sugar, all these sweets? If you just discipline yourself for 3 weeks, and we're in this lockdown period for about that time to start with anyway, then you'll find when you come out the other side that you're a different person in terms of the way you respond to food, especially with sugar. So I'd say cut out the sugar. I'd say don't cook. Go on.
Sorry, mate. One thing you taught me about 4 or 5 months ago, which I thought was really encouraging, because I never want to sound like doom and gloom, but you said to me, as a cardiologist, that if somebody starts to change their diet and really makes an effort, they can start seeing big improvements in health within 3 weeks. So that's the good news, isn't it?
Absolutely, Steve. You're right. Even within days to weeks, that starts in terms of markers of, of risk. They do improve. I've had many of my own patients, for example, who've sent, their conditions such as type 2 diabetes into remission, having been type 2 diabetic for more than 10 years, within a month, within a few weeks. People have come off blood pressure pills within a few weeks, just by cutting out the starches. So after talking about sugar, I'd say that, we need to really reduce, the floury-based products, too much rice, too much pasta. It doesn't mean you don't have to, don't cut it out completely, but especially if you're type 2 diabetic or overweight, cutting those down, almost eliminating them from your diet is going to have a really positive, strong impact on your health. And of course, whole fruit vegetables, if you can get some oily fish in. You talked earlier about, eating, unprocessed meat, very nutrient dense, very satiating, plenty of protein, especially if you're older. Protein is something else that, is a big issue for people over the age of 60. They don't get enough protein. And not having enough protein actually contributes to an immune system that is suboptimal. So that's really important. So just going back to really what Granny, used to eat, to be honest. There's a saying, if when you look at a food or a packet or something, if Granny wouldn't recognize the ingredients, don't eat it. It's actually a very simple but strong message. So, cooking from scratch. And again, in terms of price, I think you tweeted something about this, that a piece of whole fruit, an apple, costs less than most chocolate bars.
Yeah.
So actually, you can eat healthily on a budget, and it doesn't have to be that you're, denying yourself treats. You can still save them up and have them on an occasional basis, but you should not be having them every day, mate. Absolutely not. You don't need to, and you'll feel better. There's another aspect to all of this. It isn't just about thinking about the long-term and more immediate health benefits. It's about how you feel mentally, how you feel physically, how your energy levels are, how you sleep. All of these things are really important to good health. And also keeping your immune system optimized.
Maybe what we should ask everybody, day one, this is going to carry on, we're going to do this every single day till this thing is over. Maybe jump on the scales today. Take a reading of your weight, but also take a reading, just get a diary going for this period where we're in lockdown. And write down how you feel today. Write down maybe your anxiety level on 1 to 10. Write down headaches on 1 to 10. Write down all other symptoms, gout, whatever you've got right now. Tie that into your body weight, and let's together over the coming weeks with the nutritionists and the doctors that are dialing in, with the fast food shops shut, with the restaurants shut, let's all together start to cook healthily, understand our food more, and let's see how we feel as a nation coming out the other side of this.
Steve, I think one thing is also that it's a nice free resource. Obviously, I've written this book called The Piopi Diet, but if people Google Piopi Diet, Tom Watson, there's an article that I'd contributed, I'd written for the I newspaper, and it gives a very basic plan of what to avoid and what to eat. So that's that's for free, and you can adjust it accordingly according to that. But in terms of cost as well, once people reduce the amount of snack foods they're eating as well, they'll be able to afford a little bit more, have a bit more food. For the healthy stuff.
In fact, this program, before we called it the Food Bank show, one of the things we were talking about, we were going to call it Fast Food Forward. In other words, we'll teach you how to fast. In other words, to many people, cutting out and missing meals completely sounds like impossible. But once you start eating the right foods, then fasting becomes so easy. I've not had anything to eat since yesterday breakfast, so a day and a half, feel absolutely fabulous. And the Fast Food Forward was, look, we'll teach you to fast, you will ultimately save money, and then if you could forward the food to the food banks that you've saved, because the food banks are in crisis, which we're going to talk about a lot more in the show as we go through. But hey, thank you for coming on. Will you come on a few more times over the coming weeks for us?
Mate. Very happy to.
Well, you keep healthy, you keep safe. And just one more time, where is that plan that you and Tom Watson have got?
If people just Google Piopi, P-I-O-P-P-I, Piopi Diet, put my name in, Aseem Malhotra or Dr. Aseem, and Tom Watson, there will be a link to the I newspaper, which talks about the plan that helped Tom, but gives very specific advice in terms of what you should avoid eating and what you should be eating more of.
Brilliant. Jack will get a graphic upon that tomorrow if you can make a note. We'll make sure that we publicise that for everybody. I've also, my book is not for profit, as you know, Aseem, but what I've done on Amazon is I've taken the Kindle version right down to £3.99. And then all that money is going to charity, but at £3.99, the entire book, and which you lovely wrote some great comments on the back, is there for everybody. Aseem, we'll speak to you over the next couple of days, my friend.
All right, mate. Take care. All the best. Bye-bye.
So that was the incredible Aseem Malhotra. Now, Aseem said, and he's a cardiologist, he's used to fix people's hearts in hospital. He's doing less of that today because he said, while I could repair one person at a time, I'm now trying to help 1 million people at a time. Really driven young cardiologist, written a great book called The Piopi Diet. He's currently working on his second book. And hopefully already on our first session today, you're getting the idea of where we're going. We're going to be interviewing some great people. And I think we've got somebody on the line already.
We have Emma Revie here.
Emma, okay. We're going to joined next by Emma Revie. Emma Revie is the CEO of the Trussell Trust. The Trussell Trust support 1,200 food banks across the UK, and it is the Trussell Trust that we are partnering with. So if you make a donation on the bottom of the screen via text, that goes directly into the bank of the Trussell Trust. If you make a donation via justgiving.com, type in the Food Bank Show, that will also go direct to the Trussell Trust. And more than ever, the Trussell Trust and the food banks need help. Emma, are you there? How are you?
I'm really well, thank you. I really appreciate you having me on and for everything you're doing.
Oh, we're going to try. We're going to try and raise £100,000, and then if we get there, we'll keep going. Tell everybody a bit about the food banks, the Trussell Trust, and why more than ever you need everybody's help.
Sure. So the Trussell Trust support a network of 1,250 food banks across the whole of the United Kingdom. What we do is when somebody finds they don't have enough money to buy food, potentially because they're speaking to somebody at Citizens Advice or they're in contact with their local GP or their housing officer, and as part of that consultation, it's been discovered they don't have enough money to afford food. Those people refer them to their local food bank, where we will provide a warm welcome. And normally we would invite somebody in to have a cup of tea with us and sit and have a conversation whilst we provide 3 days of emergency food for them and their families. Obviously, much has had to change over the last couple of weeks as our food banks have been responding to social distancing requirements and lots of other issues. So we've had to change our model significantly. But at the same time, we believe we're starting to see an increase in the number of people who are having to turn to food banks because they simply don't have enough money to buy the essentials such as food.
And is it mainly adults that get the packages, or is there a high percentage of children as well?
So over 30% of our food parcels go to children, and we find that at certain times of the year we have more children who are requiring food from food banks. So during school holidays, which, as you know, at the moment it's an enforced long-term school holiday we are experiencing. So during those times, parents have the added cost, particularly if their kids are normally on free school meals. They're having to find extra money to provide 3 meals a day from home. They have the extra costs of extra heating whilst the house is occupied during the day, and also just trying to entertain their children. And so we find we get a surge in people having to come to food banks with children during Easter holidays, summer holidays and Christmas time, unfortunately. So at the moment, that's something we're very concerned about. It's what's happening for those families who are now having to stay home with their children.
What I was fascinated when I spoke to you on the phone the other day, and that's why I said, look, I will pound for pound match every donation we get up to £100,000, was that the first time I've ever heard somebody that runs a charity say, I'm trying to close my charity down eventually because we shouldn't have to have food
Absolutely.
banks. And I just thought, well, this is the charity I want to give my money to, because you're saying, look, we shouldn't need food banks, but we do need food banks. And let's all work together. And I'm convinced that when we come out the other side of this, what's going to happen, there will be some silver linings, and maybe, just maybe, one of the things will be that we can find a way to feed the nation every single day. Now, before we move on, tell me a little bit about, because obviously we want people to donate with Just Giving or on the text, but also tell everybody that's watching, and this will be played out time and time again on YouTube after we finish today, tell people about donating the physical foods in their local supermarkets and how they would go about doing that.
Thanks, Steve. So obviously, we really recognise it's challenging at the moment. You see people are having to go out just once a day to do their shopping and having to apply social distancing measures in supermarkets. And there are limits on some key items in supermarkets. But we need donations more than ever. Our food banks are absolutely reliant on the generosity of the general public, and the general public have been amazing, but we need you to continue in your supermarkets where you can, providing those key items that we need. So UHT milk, tinned meats, tinned vegetables, the key items that make up a food parcel that will provide a family that can't afford to buy food, these essential items during this crisis. So again, you can continue to donate in supermarkets. supermarkets such as Asda have lifted the limits for food banks being able to go in and purchase items in their stores, which has been great, but we really are dependent on the goodwill of the general public. So if you can find a way to just put an extra item in a food bank basket in your store, across all of the major supermarket chains, there are collection points. You can also, some of our food banks are still receiving donations in person, although a lot of our food banks have had to switch to home delivery models, so the centres themselves aren't open. But if you go onto our website or onto the website of your nearest food bank, that might not be within the Trussell Trust network, it might be an independent food bank, and see firstly what items they need, because each food bank is different and will need slightly different items. But secondly, see where they're asking you to place your donation. So it could be you can drop it off at one of the centres, but also it could be that there are key collection points around your community that they can signpost you to. But the key message is please keep donating. We are really dependent on you. Really dependent more than ever. And of course, your costs going up at the moment because having to do home deliveries obviously doesn't come for free. Yep. So we need your money, in the words of Bob Geldof. Please text. It's really, really good. There are real people still living in our country. Around 2% of homes in the UK have used food banks over the last year. 2%. That's a real problem. We need your help now more than ever. See, please do everything you can. Asda, I know, have just been brilliant with their support, not just by helping you, take more out of the stores, but also financially. Liam Payne, pop singer, has been brilliant with his donations recently. So you're having some great successes. And we're incredible generous. Incredible generosity of people. It's been mind blowing. Emma, will you come back on the show later in the week for us? We'll do everything we can to raise that money for you. Thank you for coming live on the show. Thank you. That was the lovely Emma. She is responsible for the Trussell Trust with their team. I did all the things that you would normally do before you go and put a lot of money into a charity last week. I checked out their premises, I checked out the team, make sure those on huge salaries. They are a brilliant charity. When you donate your cash, it goes where it needs to go. Now, have we got my good friend Tom Watson on the line now? Tom, are you there? Hey! I am, Steve. How are you doing? I'm fantastic, mate. How are you? Very good. Sorry about the tech problems earlier. It's all down to my IT incompetence. I'm there, mate. Honestly, I'm a technophobe myself. Now, I've been plugging your book a little bit this morning, Downsizing. For me, it's one of the best books ever written on health because it's a story and it explains, really, it's not nothing technical. It's your own journey of how you lost your 8 stone. Give us a brief introduction onto that. But when we spoke on the phone yesterday, the thing I want really to focus on is what could life be like post this virus? Right. In many senses, mine's an everyman story. I got to middle age, having piled on the pounds since my early 20s. And by the time I thought I was going to die, when I hit 50, I was 22 stone, morbidly obese, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, and all the things that come with being overweight. And a tiny voice became a raging voice in my head, and it was the voice that was saying, I don't want to die. I want to live for my young kids. And I read into it, and what the real moment was when I basically read the research in the last 5 or 10 years and decided to define Public Health England's nutritional guidelines. And I changed my nutrition dramatically, went low carb, and the weight came off, the sleep got better, the brain fog lifted. I became more chilled out, I became healthier, I just felt like a totally different person. And within a year, I went public to say that I put my type 2 diabetes into reverse. And that's still the case. I'm still, if you can hear a bang, that's the postman dropping through the post. Tons of post. And that was it. I just feel great. And so I wrote an account of it. What the book is definitely not, though, Steve, is a solution. Is a sort of manual to tell people what to do. People have got to do it their own way. Mm-hmm. It's really my own story. But there are lessons, I think, for all of us, particularly when we're looking at the research from the coronavirus now that is suggesting that
those people who are overweight or obese, sadly, those that are type 2 are more susceptible to complications with the virus than others. And, to answer the second part of your question, I think that when we get through this crisis, and we must all focus on the immediate challenges now, but when we get through it, there's going to be some very big questions that need to be answered about public health guidelines, about the food we put into ourselves, about the food supply and the levels of food production we've got in the country, because people need to be healthier.
And Aseem was saying earlier on, I know Aseem and yourself are good friends, that we've got to keep the social distancing, obviously. We've got to keep washing our hands. But then probably the best next thing after those two steps that nobody's yet talking about is this returning to real food. And with the fast food restaurants closed at the moment, and the other restaurants closed, we've got to make some changes anyway. And hopefully what we can do through the show every morning is try and paint the picture of what good food looks like.
Steve, you're doing amazing work with this, because actually the one thing people probably have got more time, is more time on their hands now. They can think about the weekly shopping. They can think about preparing food differently. There's time to have family meals. And we're doing it in our household. We've thought more about meals. We're spending more. We're making soups. We're making stocks out of the chicken bones. We're just thinking a little bit more ahead than when you're under pressure at work than you normally can. And those tiny little changes make a difference. They did for me. In the book I talk about this. When I decided that I was really going for it, I had a big clear out day where I got rid of all the secret sugar in sort of processed food. I got rid of all the sort of high, sort of starchy carbs in the cupboards, and completely changed what I put in the fridge and the cupboards. And we can all do that while we've got this period of lockdown, I think. And certainly going forward, the nutrition, there's a sort of battle being waged between nutritional scientists around the planet over this. But the one thing that unites everyone is we've just got too much refined sugar in our diets. Yeah. Some people, they're eating up to 50 kilograms of hidden sugars and refined sugars in confectionery every year. And it's just too much for us. It's taking years off all our lives. And I think when we get through this, that's where public policy is going to have to be.
Yeah, we were earlier on, every day we're going to reveal how much sugar is hiding in a certain food. Earlier on we showed the Subway and said, look, the actual bread alone, when you eat a 12-inch Subway, inside the body, according to Dr. David Unwin's research, turns into the equivalent of 15 cubes of hidden sugar. Same effect on the blood glucose level as just eating 15 teaspoons of sugar. Now, no human being would do that, but we don't realise it's there in the bread. And crikey, now's our chance to seize the moment. And yes, it's we're all going to be affected one way or the other with the virus, and hopefully as many people watching get through it. But coming out the other side, we have to change our eating habits. And like you say, probably now is the right time to be doing it.
There's no doubt about it. David Unwin, he's a hero of the movement in my view. The idea that he talks about the glycemic load of food, the equivalent in teaspoons of sugar. You know what? I've been eating basmati rice 3 or 4 days a week for about 25 years, thinking it was healthy. And then I look at David's grid, and this is even after I'd done my own search. David's grid, I think it's got the equivalent of 9 teaspoons of sugar in. So one of the things we can all do when we're at home is, sadly, there's no easy signposting to this. You have to do a bit of your own research. And if your show can expose some of David's sort of figures to people, I think they'd really benefit from that, because it'll help families make their own decisions about getting healthy.
In fact, what we're talking, Tom, Jack, can you just bring up one more of the slides? And we showed Subway, what Subway turns into inside the body earlier. We'll try and while we're talking, we'll keep you on screen, but maybe expose 1 or 2 more. Because I was the same as you. I used to think rice was healthy. And then on days when I wasn't having rice, I'd have a big jacket potato with salad, because I thought that was the right thing to do. And that's why I was obese the whole time while I was still exercising.
The worst one for me is when I when I was starting to sort of think about getting healthy, before I actually committed to it, I used to get up in the morning, I'd have a massive bowl of porridge, probably put a couple of bananas in it and put honey in it, thinking that's better than sugar. You see, look at that. There you got banana in there. I mean, bananas. You might as well just sort of lick the bag of sugar out. You'd have that. Most people wake up thinking porridge is the healthy option. And you put all that stuff in it, and you've got a sugar drop by 10, 11 o'clock, and you need a Mars bar.
And isn't that why we need to change the food guidelines? Because we keep saying 5 fruit and veg a day, 5 fruit and veg a day, but it really depends on what those 5 fruits are, doesn't it? If it's bananas and raisins, like my dad likes, sadly now he's diabetic type 2 because that was his 2 go-to fruits. They're the ones full of sugar.
Yeah, I mean, I rarely have bananas now, but if I do, I'll only have half a banana, or I'll have half a pear. There's plenty of other lower sort of sugar options like blueberries, raspberries, blackberries. You can even have them with a little bit of cream if you're a bit careful about with some low carb. What's not to like about that?
Absolutely. Now, my son's just said there's questions coming in. I can't see them on my laptop. If somebody can come and fire those up for us. Tom, hey mate, thanks for everything. Thanks for writing this brilliant book that I recommend everybody goes out and gets. And Aseem was also saying there's a free download somewhere on the internet which we're going to find the link to, which was I think your diet plan when you shed the weight.
Aseem's book, the POP diet, was very useful to me. It's essentially the Mediterranean diet, so loads of salads, loads of good veg, loads of olive oil. You can just picture yourself with a low sugar pina colada sitting next to the beach when you're on Aseem's diet. It's great for you.
And tell everybody what you're up to right now, because obviously you've stepped down from being the deputy leader of the Labour Party. Tell everybody what's filling your time at the moment.
Well, right now I'm writing a political thriller. It's my 3rd book, and that's got to be. We're under a very tight deadline on that, so we're currently rewriting plot lines because obviously politics has changed dramatically in the last month. So all the assumptions we were making have completely gone out the window. Basically, we're rewriting the whole book. But I'm enjoying that very much, and I'm trying to healthy. So like everyone else at home, my routine for fitness has completely gone out the window. I can't go to the gym more. I've got to have social isolation. So I'm trying to work out my own sort of daily routine to stay active because we're on kind of lockdown in the house most of the time. And maybe we could talk if you can get me back on the program, Steve. Maybe
love to have you on as many times as you want, my friend.
I'd love to because I think there's a lot of people at home working out. Okay, they may get if they're motivated, they may get for a run with them once a day exercise. But what do they do in the house to stay? To stay active, and I've got a few ideas about that perhaps we could all sort of come together and try and get best practice for being fit while you're locked in the house.
That sounds great. Does that mean we get to see you in a leotard?
Not quite. It didn't really work for that other famous politician who did that.
Absolutely. Tom, thank you very, very much, my friend. We'll speak to you later in the week if we can.
Thanks, Steve, and thank you for what you're doing. The Trussell Trust, they're a great charity. I used to work with them when I was an MP. They're doing great work for people who really need it. So this is a really great initiative.
You're a superstar. Thanks, Tom. That was the brilliant Tom Watson, author of Downsiding, the previous deputy leader of the Labour Party. Right, so I'm going to quickly answer some of your questions. I'm sorry we won't get through to all of them. But let's see how many we can. Georgia Lenora Garson says, after eating Primal for a significant period of time, you can actually recognize the insulin spikes in your body if you consume large amounts of carbohydrates. So awesome how we can take control back. You can really quickly see the difference for sure. David John says, how does presence of metabolic disease, overweight in critical care, COVID-19, differ to general population? What about absolute risk? So what Aseem Malhotra was saying is that when we are overweight, we have a problem with our white blood cells. White blood cells really important for our immunity. When we are eating lots and lots of food, as we're eating, when we're metabolizing, I write in the book, the body is quite black and white. When you're either in one of two modes. You're either breaking down food, you're digesting food, you're metabolizing food, or your body's in repair mode. We need to get our body into repair mode more rather than metabolizing food more. To get into repair mode, that means you need periods without food coming in. Trouble with carbs and snacking and potatoes and rice, you get what we call a carbocoaster effect. You get a sugar spike because they all turn into sugar. Insulin grabs that sugar, puts it in the fat stores really, really quickly, so we're hungry again. We get this carbocoaster effect. By eating real foods, more vegetables, more meats, more fish, more chicken, again, certain fruits low in sugar like the berries, the blackberries, the blueberries, strawberries, raspberries. By eating things that are low in sugar, we feel full more. We have a hormone called leptin, tells us we're full more, and therefore we don't snack in between. That means we can rest our body, putting it into repair mode. But I will get that question answered more in full by a doctor, because I am definitely not a doctor. Okay, Samuel says, why do the government healthy eating guidelines include carbohydrates such as rice, pasta and bread? These guidelines were formulated, it's in Tom's book, it's in my book, it's in most books. They were formulated in the 70s. They were off the back of one piece of research by a gentleman called Ansel Keys, who we find out in the end, while he may have had good intentions, has probably done more harm to our planet than any other single human being. The American Heart Association then endorsed his guidelines, then it was written in stone, and then over the next 30 to 40 years, as people start to realize they were completely wrong, the food industry had got so rich off the back of it, their lobbyists kept saying, no, it's the truth, no, it's the truth. You have to avoid saturated fats, the lobbyists said, sugar's not the problem. The reality is, too much carbs and too much sugar is a huge, huge problem. Carbohydrates purely on their own, not too bad. But the second you mix carbohydrates with fat, as in all packaged foods, the problem happens. See, in nature, you never get fat and carbohydrates together other than in milk and nuts. If something you eat is once had a face on it, like meat and fish, that is predominantly fat and protein. If what you eat grew out of the ground, so it's a vegetable or a fruit, that is predominantly protein and carbohydrates. Never do we get fat and carbs together. And there is experiment after experiment, proof after proof, research paper after research paper that says the deadly thing is putting the two together. Sadly, all ultra-processed foods put the two together. So back to why the guidelines are wrong. They are just wrong. That's why the likes of Tom Watson, the likes of myself, Aseem, and so many doctors, we have something called the PHC, the Public Health Collaboration. We're lobbying government to change those guidelines because all they do is make corporations rich and public unhealthy. It's about corporate wealth and not public health. The Eat Well guideline today is all about corporate wealth and not our health, and that's why we're sick. We've got more sickness in the UK than we've ever had. All the things that we see today, the obesity, the diabetes, the fatty liver disease, all these things, and the cancers virtually didn't exist 100 years ago till we changed the food that we eat today, and it's just not great. Are these food bank drop-off stations in the supermarket, says Rod Jinks? Yes, they're in most supermarkets. Jackie Wilson said, Steve and Tom, how to spread the word in normal life. Can we do with friends, etc., but local surgery, uninterested in practical low-carb diabetes reversal? Very, very good point there from Jackie. If you have got diabetes or pre-diabetes, here is what you need to do. You need to go across to diabetes.co.uk, not the other one, which is Diabetes UK. They're backed by Schweppes, okay? Sponsored by Schweppes. Just go figure, right? But diabetes.co.uk, they have helped over 70,000 people reverse their diabetes in the UK alone by following a low-carb program. And anecdotally, that's how Tom lost his weight. That's how I lost my weight, and the same can happen to you too. Right, we're going to bring the show to an end. We will be putting it back on the web very, very shortly on YouTube. Please join us again tomorrow at the same time, 10 o'clock, when my family and I will be bringing you another show with some more great guests. Tomorrow we've got a fantastic nutritionist, Poppy, going to be joining us live on air. And please, 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 I promise you we can together help you work this food mess out. I promise you we can help you get healthier, and I promise you we can help you save money. Some big claims there. Trust me on that one, and do make the donation today. Pay forward some of those savings today by texting the number on your screen or going to justgiving.com, and let's help the food banks of the UK. 2% of families in the UK rely on the food banks, and yet today there are some serious problems because of COVID, etc. We will get through this together. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for your questions. Please do join us again tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. And if you could, just text, tweet, email, phone everybody you know, and try and get them to watch as well. Because if we can get this higher up YouTube, more people will see it, more people get the message, more people we can help to live more healthily, and of course at the same time help the food banks of the UK.